Joining us to discuss commodity trade and sustainability is Gbenga Olowoye from UBIS University. So Gbenga, firstly, an abundance of these primary commodities are provided by somewhat poorer nations to the West, but will we ever see an empowerment of these nations?
Recently, only last month, the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit took place in New York. And we're looking now again at 17 Sustainable Development Goals with more than 100 concrete measures. But it takes concrete determination, the part of the divide, both the supplying nations and even the countries that use these primary commodities. Don't forget the Irish proverb that says, "Do not trust the warrior who cannot cry." That means there has to be a follow-up with concrete actions, with passion and compassion in ways to make sustainable empowerment become realistic. So we want to be able to see sustainable development goals translate into well-being of these poor producers from these different countries so that their lives not become enmeshed in a cycle of poverty. Ending poverty is number one on those development goals. It has always been on so many agendas, but let's hope that the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, with what took place in New York, with endorsing all these sustainable development goals, will translate into concrete actions that will also translate into well-being for those who matter in these different poor countries.
So looking forwards then, what is going to assist these emerging economies with leveraging their primary commodities? You know, people always think that for economic growth to happen, the economic engine always had to be industrialization. But if you look at the example of Chile, for instance, Chile decided to use agricultural development, especially in the 1980s. The only thing we knew about Chile before 1960 was copper, exploitation and exploration of copper. But they decided to do things differently by, beginning with export of apples. And that was in the 60s. And within a short time, they diversified into other sectors by, first and foremost, engaging in better production methods, using production technology, and excellent management methods. And they use that as a basis to develop other sectors and begin to profit from natural resources, things that were very abundant within their own environment. And they started doing things very well and grew their economy 7.2% by 1980 from about 2%. So they developed grapes, wines, salmon, and even tomato paste, and they became a global leader using agricultural development for economic growth. So it's not just about industrialization. So many developing countries, in the poorest of places, they are so blessed with abundant natural resources, which they can leverage, and thereafter do what Chile did by investing in education, in infrastructure development, and technology growth. With that, natural resources can play a very sustainable role in ways poor people begins to benefit from their natural environment. Maybe that's one of the ways to go. Yeah, of course. And on top of that, what about the difference that trade and trade policy can make to these developing economies?
Excellent. You need to have a sufficient participation. You need to have a sufficient understanding. And you need to be, part of what is taking place to use trade as a sufficient instrument for development. And multilateralism is just not anything anybody can run away from these days. The WTO is beginning to midwife all these agreements. You have a lot of economic partnership agreements between all these developed countries and all the developing nations. So it becomes very important for developing countries to invest in capacities of their own people in order to be able to negotiate trade and trade policy issues for the growth, for the economic growth of their own people, because the world has become so small and more big players will want to take advantage of what multilateralism and all this economic partnership has to offer. So you have an example in Africa, for instance. There is a trade policy training center that has been helping to build capacities of the African trade professionals. For instance, TRAPCA, based in Tanzania, has just launched this year a trade facilitation training facility in order to empower their own people so that they can better negotiate trade instruments, economic partnerships within the multilateral framework that we now have, which, if done very well, will indeed transform to economic well-being for their own people, vis-a-vis job creation, vis-a-vis SME development, and vis-a-vis expansion and diversification within the market opportunities that are available within the global space.
Gbenga, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Be sure to click back to Jugoscopy TV for more updates and exclusive interviews. We'll see you next time.